Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Now, first of all, shall we check attendance? Take roll. Jennifer?
Okay, so Commissioner Gelby is here. He's not here, he's absent. Thomas Vu is present. Joshua Stark is present. Yan Zhu is
Yanzhu,
present, Vice Chair. And Vincent Wetzel is present. And Scott Peterson and Amy Tanner are absent.
Thank you. Okay, first of all, let's have Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Anyone wishing to address the commission or any agenda item should fill out the request to speak form and present it to the clerk prior to the completion of staff presentation. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 1A, election of commission chair and vice chair.
I'll move to re-elect the current chair and vice chair.
I second.
Any discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next item. Presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission? No? Okay, move on. Item number 1C, commission communications. Anything new? We're all good? Okay, move on. Item number 2, approval of minutes of the November 2nd, 2015 meeting. Any motion?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. Let's move on to item number 3. Consideration of the status report on the development of the 2016 Public Transportation Strategy, Yolo County Transportation District component. And let's welcome.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Ana Cortez, and I'm a senior analyst for the Department of Public Works. The city and YCTD, Yolo County Transportation District, are cooperating in this presentation. So I'm going to do the first part, and then Mr. Terry Bassett is going to do the second part. In 2016, our city council identified the creation of a public transit strategy as one of the strategic planning priorities. And tonight, we present one element of this strategy. Specifically, we will discuss the general framework for YCTD's role in this public transportation strategy. As we conceptualize steps, we looked at 3 different things. Number 1 is we looked at our desire to increase ridership in YOLO bus usage. Number 2, we looked at the desire to address any obstacles that may be in the way and that are stopping residents from using YOLO bus. And then third, we wanted to identify the features that may attract new ridership. For example, looking at mobile apps and so on, basically any type of new approach that we could put in place to try to increase demand for the bus system. In the report that we gave you tonight, we outline 8 goals that frame future recommendations. These are listed in pages 1 and 2. We understand the value of public input. And for this reason, we also list milestones in page 2. We presented you with a series of dates of key events that we see as part of our approach of making sure that we can receive input from the public as we consider new changes to the bus system. As you can see, we have a number of spaces, and today is, for all purposes, the first public forum where we present some of the general ideas. Please note that in an effort to aggressively implement changes, we also recommend 3 short-term minor changes. Number 1, we recommend the elimination of Stonegate Drive, Village Parkway, Lake Washington Boulevard loop. And we offer you maps as attachments so that you can see what loops we're referring to. We also recommend the elimination of a portion of Golden Gate Drive between Promenade and Oakland Bay, and Southport Parkway / Otis Avenue loops for Route 39. Also, we propose the elimination of the 8:40 p.m. trip for Route 35 due to the fact that very few riders actually use that particular time. We provide you with alternatives or options for actions tonight. In the last page, in page 3, we ask for your support for items 1 through 6. And to basically summarize the reason for our presentation, for us being here, is we would like to get your feedback on the 8 goals that we present. We would like to get feedback from you on the proposed process for public input and so on. And we would like to get your support for the first 6 alternatives or options outlined in the report. So now I'm going to introduce Mr. Terry Bassett, YCTD Executive Director, that will give you a lot more detail on these recommendations.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Terry Bassett. I'm Executive Director of the Yolo County Transportation District, and I've been at the helm for 34 years now. What I'd like to do is go over a PowerPoint presentation that she's teeing up, and if she can't, I can go ahead and wing it. There we go. Oh, this can rise to my height. This is nice.
That's it, you maxed out.
All right, well, so we'll go on to the next slide. I can do this? I'll see if I'll get in trouble here. Well, that's not the right. I may need some help. I may need some expertise. Oh, there we go. Yeah, if you can do this better than me. Got to go to the top. You're going backwards. You're going the wrong direction. Okay. Now, these are the goals that Anna read to you that are in your staff report. And I'm not going to repeat them, but I wanted to emphasize that there were 8 goals that that staff worked up with us and working with members of our city council, your city council. I need to stress that what we're talking about is kind of a 2-phase approach. The first phase are doing some minor things that are relatively easy to implement. Perhaps they don't require a public hearing, though politically you may want to have a public hearing, I don't know. And then the other set of changes is a little more substantial, and I won't be able to get into too many specifics because there are some steps that still need to be undertaken, but I'll talk about that briefly. So you could go into the next slide. So the alternatives here that are listed involve 2 routes, routes 35 and 39. The 35 runs between the transit center across the street and the Southport community. The 39 goes from the Southport community up as far north as it goes to Stone Park, works its way up to 15th Street, and then gets on the freeway and goes into downtown Sacramento. So the big difference between the two is the 39 goes into Sacramento, the 35 does not. As she was saying, we're recommending support of eliminating part of the Route 35 and the 39. What's listed there first is the 39, and we've got a graphic we'll show you in a second that involves getting rid of an area where there's not a lot of ridership, not a lot of boarding activity. And in order for you to make service changes without a public hearing, it's got to affect less than 25% of the riders and less than 25% of the miles. We're also recommending you eliminate the last Route 35 trip, which from the last survey, there were 6 people that rode that bus. Our standard for the 35 is to be at least 10 people per trip on the 35. Whereas in contrast, it's a much higher standard for the routes 40, 41, and 240. They are much more productive than the 35. You've already gone through those recommendations with Anna, so we'll go ahead and pass to the maps. So this is the Route 39, roughly as it operates now, and it's pretty circuitous, as you might guess. And if you're familiar with the Otis area down around the Bridgeway Lakes, you're going to see we really go out into the boonies to pick up passengers in the morning. And for your information, we serve the Bridgeway Island first, then go to Bridgeway Lakes, then go and do the Linden Loop, go up to among some streets along the east side of Jefferson, and then we work our way up to Stone Park and 15th, as I said before. The change, which is the next slide, would be to eliminate those two sections that you see. Again, we're trying to eliminate the parts of the routes that are inefficient and also enable people to make a slightly faster trip than they currently do. So the people in Bridgeway Island won't have to go all the way down to Bridgeway Lakes anymore. They'll be able to go to Sacramento more directly. The other route change, next slide, is the Route 35. Now the 35 runs 7 days a week. It runs more on weekdays than it does on Saturdays and Sundays. But it does, it serves Bridgeway Island area. It also goes to, takes, I guess that's Marshall, over to Jefferson. It works its way, currently it works its way around the Southport Town Center and then gets on to Washington Street. And then it works its way, Lake Washington Street, then it works its way up to Village Parkway. Then it has to cut back and head back towards Jefferson because there is no way to get up north unless you get back onto Jefferson. And then it uses Stone and Park and works its way up to Westacre before eventually going to the West Sacramento Transit Center right at Merkley and right across the street from here, literally. The recommended change, next slide, is to get rid of the longest loop so that we can improve our on-time performance. The reason this particular loop was picked was because it's relatively low productivity, and we're having difficulty with the Route 35 staying on time, particularly during times when the high school is opening or closing. We get swamped around Jefferson Boulevard. This will help fix that by giving us 6 or 7 more minutes to do our trip and lay over at the transit center for the next trip. The other slides, we won't get into the specifics, but we have counts for where the boarding, the ons and offs are throughout our system. I'm not going to get into the details of this, but we do have that information if you have any questions. Regarding the longer term changes, those are going to more than likely fall in line with the 3 workshops that have been proposed. But the concept is to try to have commute service running more frequently, but running a shorter, faster route so it can get people into downtown on a much more expedient basis. Whereas now you can spend upwards of 40 minutes. This will shorten it down considerably from that. But those are bigger changes that will require a public hearing for certain. Likewise, there are some changes in the Route 35 we want to do to just make that as efficient as possible while still serving areas like the low-income housing area in the Bridgeway Island area. So that's it for my presentation, and if you have any questions, just let me know.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, I do have some questions. Sorry. First, just some specific questions. Why just the Friday service at 8:40? What's happening on Friday at 8:40 as opposed to Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday?
I'm sorry, what are you looking at?
Oh, is it just the last route every day? Is it every 8:40, or is it just
Every weekday, every 8:40.
every weekday? Okay, I thought you said the last weekday. I'm sorry, my mistake. So the last route on the weekday service. Okay, and you said you have 6 folks on average using that.
Right, and that was done, we had a survey done by interns that were marking where people were getting on and off. and they were doing every trip of the 35 and every trip of the 39 for that matter.
Okay. Is there the potential that we are missing night shift workers and maybe need to just recalculate the time of service for that particular route? Like, for example.
We've not received any demand for that.
Got it.
But one possibility for the 35, and we're working with staff on it, it may be in the future that it could serve part of the industrial area north of Bridgeway Island. Have a quick stop there before it goes to the east side of Jefferson.
Great. Okay. Another one is the changes to the 35, the Great Big Loop. Right now, that does seem to make sense. If you go back there, you know, there's not a lot going on, but there is development in process. Will there be a reassessment of the need for service in that loop once there's additional development?
Well, what we've
Takes place.
proposed, and we can't get into too many specifics, but once Village Parkway is completed, the 39 would be rerouted and go straight up Lake Washington Boulevard to Village Parkway,
I see.
perhaps having a stop at the Bridge District before going into downtown Sacramento.
I see. Okay. So
The 39, right,
rather than the 35.
right.
Right. Okay. All right. Sorry. For item number 3, where appropriately significantly decrease the length of public transit routes to provide a viable alternative to SOV. By length of public transit routes, do you mean length of time? Is that
Well, it's
what you're
both
looking at?
distance and time.
Distance and
So, for
time.
example, Bridgeway Lakes is a long way. It eats up a lot of time and mileage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and there's not a lot of ridership. There's some ridership, but not a lot. So that is cutting both miles and time.
Okay. And I'm just curious what you believe have you done projections on what you think this will do to ridership?
Yeah, we've got some numbers. I don't have them with me at the moment, but we know what the ridership is in the places where we're proposing to lop off.
Okay. What's I mean, are we losing a lot of money from losing this service, or are we losing ridership potentially because of the time
You
constraints?
might lose some ridership, but we hope you might gain some because the
maybe,
buses will
that's
run on time more and hopefully make better connections at the transit center for the 35. For the 39, you may lose a little bit in the beginning, but it may attract riders in Bridgeway Island because they don't have to go all the way down to Bridgeway Lakes anymore.
So it would seem maybe when you cut this service to somehow play up, get some advertising out there or targeted, to groups who are highest propensity ridership for those lanes, to let them know of the changes. So because that kind of change can really spur, especially if your times are 90% or better of the car commute times, you can see really, dramatic increases in ridership through that type of service. So I would encourage you to consider, getting the word out in ways that attract the kinds of riders that would be using the service.
And just so you're aware, Commissioner Stark, if I recall, the announcement for the workshops was put in bills?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, so you are correct, Commissioner. I mean, we want to make sure that not only the current riders know about these changes, but also that potential new riders.
Right.
And what the impetus behind all of this is that we're trying to make public transportation more attractive. And so, some of the elements of the obstacles that we have identified is the fact that it takes too long to get to work. And so this is what we've discussed with you is one strategy to begin to shorten that time, and in doing so, hopefully attract new riders. So even though we would in some ways lose some ridership, ultimately what this is about gaining a net gain of, a critical mass that would in itself make the use of public transportation more cost effective.
Right.
So when you have one bus with one person, that's costing a lot of money versus a bus with 40 people in it.
Right. Yeah, and then I want to see the bus with 40 people in it.
Yes.
I would just respectfully encourage you all to lead with that and bring that point up repeatedly, that this is an attempt, not, not out of a, sense of urgency because of a loss of funding or because of any of this. This is actually an attempt to promote and to get more ridership. I think you're sending a really good message, and I would encourage you to do that.
And that's the main message that Councilman Ledesma is pushing on us, is he's not out to wipe out a bunch of service all
Yeah.
over the place. He's trying to actually offer something that's attractive.
That's attractive, right?
Will get people, not current riders, but get a bunch of other riders.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a percentage, we carry a very tiny part of the neighborhood
Population.
population currently.
You
Yeah.
have a comment?
Yeah, one of the questions I had was, what is the 35 and 39, what is the utilization of those routes versus like some of your other more popular routes? Like, if you'd say like, one of the other routes was, 100% capacity, how would the 35 and 39 compare?
Well, let me put my glasses on, and I might be able to see part of it. If I brought my glasses, here we go. I brought some stats just in case a question like that was going to be asked. Well, just to give you an idea, the Route 40 and 41, which has a lot of history in West Sacramento, are between 16 and 19 boardings an hour. The Route 35 is 9.94 an hour. The Route 39, which is the express route, is only 8.83 people per hour. And in terms of subsidy per ride, the 35 and 39 are costing roughly twice as much as the other West Sacramento routes. And so the idea, again, is to get some numbers to increase the ridership, which will lower the subsidy per ride.
And the other question I had was, I remember when I was on your Citizen Advisory Commission a few years ago, that one of the pieces was, when you're looking at rider utilization, part of it is looking at the fares and everything and making sure that you're serving, getting the most riders on the fare, but another part of it is that, you're obligated to, especially in some of the suburban areas, you're obligated to go and reach out to those areas and provide some type of public transportation to those areas. And so I think what you're trying to do, if I hear you right, is trying to get those two goals a little bit closer in line, rather than, as you say, subsidizing of a route that is underutilized. Trying to bring that up a little bit more so it's not such a subsidy and such a drain on the rest of the more probably income-producing routes as well.
Well, we don't produce as much
Right.
income to break even. Public transit in the U.S.
Right.
does not break even.
Not
It's just
bad.
a matter of how much it's subsidized.
Right.
Yeah, if I may, neither does car travel. We subsidize car travel very heavily to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars annually in local and federal and state funding, so.
Okay.
I did have a question about the use of park and ride potential. I think there's some real potential there. I especially think there's potential as it relates to the bicycle plan and pedestrian plans. So I encourage you to consider, ways to, because really, I mean, we're not Los Angeles or Sacramento. We're not, geographically, really, really big. And a number of folks who may not be served by the 35 in the loop, for example, at Stonegate, could easily bicycle and bike. And if you have a parking spot there, they don't have to worry about, if the two bike racks are filled on the bus by the time they get there. So encouraging park and ride to include bike and park,
And
or
we're working
bike
on
and
exactly
ride.
that, but I know Councilman Ledesma is having discussions with a property owner and probably some others too, along those lines.
Excellent, thank you.
And I have a question too. As an economist, so I applaud your efforts to try to make sure that we increase the ridership and hopefully reduce the subsidy to some degree. But as economists, I think that when we think about how to increase ridership, we always think about individuals' decision-making, right? What changes their behavior or decision about whether to ride the bus? So definitely it counts on the alternatives. What alternatives do they have? We're thinking about increasing their demand. From my own perspective and from the people that I know, they're living around for example, the Stonegate area. But they think it would be nice to have a bus so that they could ride to work, for example, during the rush hour. You may wonder, like, oh, that's during the busy traffic hour and the bus is in trouble too. But once we know we have a high enough frequency, just in that maybe an hour or two time period, it doesn't have to be all day long. That'll gain a lot of ridership. And once the message is out, then people will quit driving, especially during the morning when it's, you're going to be stuck in traffic and you know for sure every 10 minutes there's going to be a bus. You will quit driving and ride the bus. That's one thing to just for your consideration. And another is that with the new development of, the Kings Arena, with our current, the River Cat, right, the games, I'm always getting into traffic when there's a game. So if we, for this specific time period, if we could add some bus frequency, that again, once the message is out, then people would like, oh, I don't want to drive over there, right? It's hard to find parking, right? It's always in traffic. If I have a bus access during rainy days or some, special days when it's not appropriate for biking, I would love to take the bus. So that's another consideration that you may want to, think about. So it's just to.
And just as an aside, what we will probably do when the events start happening at the arena is, we're still working on this, pull back all of the local routes, have them use the transit center, and then run a shuttle between the transit center and downtown, probably every 15 to 20 minutes.
That sounds
So that
good.
we don't have 5 or 6 routes messed up. We only have the 340, which would be expanded, to worry about. That way, if it's frequently enough, people just will have to ride it and make their connection.
Yeah.
But, one big weakness we have with hourly service is some connections you make, some connections you don't. And you've got a speaker here tonight who will probably speak to that.
Okay, thank you. You have one more comment?
Yeah, one question. So my wife lived in Vancouver for 6 years, Vancouver, British Columbia, where they have fantastic public transit. And one of the comments she made when she first moved here was, wow, the bus stops are, just a pole and you have to stand next to them waiting for the bus, or it's a bench. And considering days like this where it's raining, and your goal is to increase ridership, is there considerations or plans to improve the bus stops?
Well, there's a few things we're working on. One is to replace a lot of the existing shelters because they're kind of old and tired. We have some in our inventory already. We just need to finalize some design work to make sure it's ADA accessible and it's worthy of pulling the old shelter out and putting a new one in, and it's safe to do so. But as far as other improvements at the stops, it's sort of hit and miss. I mean, we have at times had a shelter. I remember one place, but there was some illegal activity going on the bus bench, so the police asked us to remove the bench, and we did, but, they're trying to get people not loitering around there. So sometimes there are other forces that affect our decisions on where the bus stops are. It's going to be difficult to add a lot of shelters because they're not cheap. It's $7,000 on up to put the shelters in. And then it becomes a maintenance issue. And the city of West Sacramento, they maintain the shelters in the transit center across the street.
Okay.
I have 2 quick questions. One of them is aspirational. One of them is pragmatic. Do you serve, you mentioned the morning commute in River City High School. Do you serve River City High School, or does Washington Unified have a bus
Well, they have to
service?
get off on Jefferson and cross the street to make it to it. But that's one of the reasons the 35 exists. When the high school was moved down south, we did something else too. We took the 40 and 41 off of the West Acre Park Stone area. So we figured we have to put something back since we wiped out 2 routes for there. So we created the Route 35. And that is part of the intention, so people up in the northern communities can get to the transit center and take a bus to and from the high school.
Great. And then more aspirational, or I won't couch it as a question so as to not make you uncomfortable, but it would be really nice to see, as wide as Jefferson Boulevard is, to see the middle lane turned into a bus rapid transit, bus-only lane. It seems, perfectly suited for that. I don't think the trolley's going to go that far eventually, although maybe it will. So, perhaps looking at removing the median on Jefferson and turning it into bus only can help alleviate your problems at River City and other places.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we have somebody request to speak, so let's invite Sharon Hicks to the floor. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to put a face to the 35 and 39 for you, and possibly why this information has been generated in the first place. So I'll give a quick little overview. So I have experience commuting in LA, I have experience commuting in Sacramento, and commuting from El Dorado or Placerville area down to Sacramento. So
We have to open, legally open, okay. Okay,
okay,
it's
thank you.
open, okay. Let's open for public comment.
Thank you. So, just so you know, this isn't my only experience commuting. And so, the reason that we're talking about 35 and 39 tonight is I moved to my home in West Sacramento, which is 4 miles from where I work in downtown Sacramento. I moved to this home because it is 6 houses away from where the bus 35 stops on that loop that is proposed to be taken away. So I have been trying to make it convenient for me to commute 4 miles on public transit so that I'm not driving. And it takes me 2 hours one way. That's what I have to consider for a 4-hour commute. And the reason is that it does not sync in the connections with the buses that leave the terminal in West Sacramento in an appropriate fashion to either get downtown or when the buses come out of downtown to connect with the 35. So most often, and I've experienced this for 2.5 years, I'll be on the bus and the bus 35 in the morning will pull up and the buses that go downtown, the last one will be leaving and it has already just left and you see it. And coming back in the afternoon, particularly on the 40, which is the connection to the 35, it will be pulling in every time I'm on it, and the bus 35 is turning the corner down the way. So it misses it by a minute, you've got an hour wait. It's particularly going home. So you can't depend on it for less than a 2-hour commute. You can't depend. So you can't have an appointment after work if you want to do that. You can't be at a meeting on time in the morning because you don't know if you're going to get there. So my frustration level became pretty high. So I've been communicating with the YOLO district and trying to figure out what could happen so that I wouldn't have a 30 to 60 minute wait to connect for a 4-mile commute. So my suggestion has been slightly tweak the schedule of the 35, make it possibly run 10 minutes later so that when you're connecting in the evening, you can get on the bus, make the connection because it's leaving 10 minutes later instead of right when the 40's pulling up or having departed. And then same in the morning, you're not going to have a 30 to 60 minute wait to connect with any other bus going over the river. So that was, I believe, the catalyst that I had, which doesn't work well for working moms. So they're not going to be taking the bus downtown if they have to make a connection or they can't rely on it, or the 39 only runs in the morning and the evening. So you're losing a lot of ridership based on just unreliable service to get home in an emergency, to make a connection after work, to make meetings on time. So I've been trying very hard to use the service because it is convenient. 6 houses away from me. The 39 is a mile away, about on a walk, lugging my computer. I would not drive so close to it being 4 miles from downtown. I'm not going to get in my car. I have the luxury of, I miss the bus doesn't show up. There's been times the roads just closed and it's like I go out to catch the bus, the roads closed, no bus. It's just every day is a challenge to think that I'm taking a bus to get to work. So those are my comments. I disagree that this report talks about the length of ridership as being the issue for the 6 minutes additional. We do have the new housing. We have college kids coming off and on that I see with the riders. I see more people in the apartments that are over there, especially some working men lately, getting on and off there. Am I timed out?
No.
I'm sorry.
Well,
I am? I'm timed out? Okay. So that's, those are my comments that I would like to say that I disagree with this. I would like to have the option of the 35. I would like to see the schedule tweaked. And if the 39 becomes an option, to stop there so that I can then just get on at the time that the 39 makes the schedule change. I'm sure that would be much more efficient, but I do not want to lose my bus service at that thing. And I would like to know whatever steps I would need to protest it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? And Terry, do you want to respond to that comment?
Yes, we have been in communication with Ms. Hicks, and she's right that we do have problems with the buses running on time, which was, ironically, that's part of the reason we wanted to shorten the route so that it could get to the transit center a little bit earlier, so it could make the connections to other buses. But she is correct in that she lives about a half mile roughly from the, where we're proposing the 35 to run. Another option, and I don't know if the cities would be receptive to it, but we talked about it a little while ago, is we don't make the 35 change until the 39 change, the big one happens. So she'd have a replacement for the 35 because the 39 will be going by the same stop that she's referring to. But it's all in timing. There's a strong desire on the city's part to make the service as successful and efficient as possible, but there may be some casualties along the way. Whenever you change a route or a schedule, you're going to impact someone. So just keep that in mind when you're weighing your decision.
One quick question. What did you make of the tweaking by 10 minutes, the route time?
Well, I sent her an email the other day saying we'll work with her on it. The issue, we just have to work it out with our contractor and their union because we're taking away a driver's break by adjusting the schedule. But I think the afternoon will be an easier one to accommodate than the morning. But we'll also take a look at the morning and see what we can do.
Okay.
Even as even before the short-term changes happen.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have to come with a proposal?
Well, there's a list of,
6 items.
yeah, and the commission may examine these alternatives. There's a list of alternatives.
Okay.
I would move that, our charge here is to, for us to hear that, and then if there is any feedback, but I would move that we we've heard the issue, and send it along to the next city draft where the board of directors is now, next week it goes to the Yolo County Transportation District Board of Directors. Unless there's any other comments that people want. But
One quick comment or question. So what is the current thinking now? Is it of note to make the changes for the 35 and the 39? So you're thinking maybe the 35 change first and then the 39, and what's the impact of making the changes at the same time to minimize, cases like Ms. Hicks?
There's nothing stopping it, but I know there's a strong desire on some people's part for us to show some sign of movement, some improvements, and to get something done short term and then something a little longer term. But delaying that 135 change until the 39 happens may be an option that the city might be interested in pursuing.
The recommendations, the alternatives that we present to you reflect a desire to see some changes happening sooner rather than later. but also reflect our interest in making sure that we have opportunities to get input from not only, in this case, the commission, the city council, but also different members of the community. As you can see in the schedule, we have a number of public workshops that have already been scheduled where we can get some of that input. So what we ask of the commission is, again, support for the recommended short-term changes, specific along the lines of what we've explained for Route 39 and 35, but also support for, and also the 840, last stop for Route 35, but also we ask for your support as far as the presentation, the overall presentation, the goals that we have, that we're using to use as framework for the conversations that we will have with the public. And of course, if you wish us to further investigate any of these recommendations, we can do that. And so that's what's in front of you. So the ask really is for you to support the recommendations that we're giving you, to give us feedback, or to ask us to conduct further investigation.
I move that we support the structure of the timeline for implementing Southport ridership improvement and cost management modifications, including those dates, as mentioned in the notes here. And that we support that those, I move that we support those, that's the process by which you go about making these changes.
I do have a question, though. So can we, right now, the changes in the route of 39 and 35, there doesn't seem to be, the new route of 39 doesn't seem to be accommodating the residents around the Stonegate area. So is it possible to have like a transitory accommodation for people like Sharon, who really needs a ride, the public transit system, and she doesn't want a break, basically a gap between now and then the new route? So is there any transitory help along the line to help residents like this?
I don't know that would happen with the 39 in the short run, because we're already having problems with that one running on time. But we do go by Stonegate even with the 39, but we don't go very deep to the east. So there are places people can board, but it's a considerable distance from her house. So again, the fallback might be to support the 39 changes in the short run, and ask that the 35 changes be delayed until the longer-term 39 changes are implemented. That may be a way around it, or
Yeah.
to solve the problem.
I'm more for that alternative route, so that, residents are less shocked by this sudden change. Any comments?
I have a movement on the, I can amend
Yeah, let's
My
add an
move,
amendment
okay.
to that move.
with the amendment as proposed by Ms. Zhu.
Yeah. So we have a motion with an amendment.
Can
Any
you
seconds?
clarify that, please?
Sure.
Sure.
I move that, that the commission support the timeline for going through the public process, and that it
With
support.
the amendment that we postpone the change of the Route 35 until further information is available about 39.
I can second that.
Any discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move to item number 4. Consideration of the update to the bicycle, pedestrian, and trails master plan.
Good evening, Vice Chair and members of the commission. Chris Doherty, Transportation Planner here at the City of West Sacramento and Public Works. The item before you, as you said, is this is the initiation of the update to the 2013 Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Master Plan. In May of 2013, the city adopted the Bike Ped Trails Master Plan, and that plan outlines the city's goals and plans to increase walking and biking throughout the city. A current adopted master plan aids the city in obtaining funding and prioritizing our bicycle and pedestrian projects citywide. Since the adoption of the 2013 plan, the city has been successful in funding or building approximately 4 miles of new bike trails, 10.4 miles of new bike lanes, and 2.25 miles of Class 3, which are bike routes throughout the city. This has been a pretty substantial increase to the city's bike ped network, and we're looking to keep that momentum as we go forward by updating the plan. For the schedule, we're kicking it off tonight. This is the first commission that has seen the report and the draft maps that are in front of you. We are looking to go out to the community in April with 2 meetings, one in the daytime and one in the evening time. Then come back to the TMI Commission on May 2nd for a workshop, and then adoption to go to council, and then to council in May. The goal is to have this wrapped up and adopted prior to June, where the statewide active transportation program applications for funding are due for the next round. So we'll have a new prioritized list of projects moving forward. And this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Sure, I have some questions. I see here proposed Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 bicycle trails and pedestrian trails. I don't see a list of Class 4. But as I'm sure you know, Class 4 bikeways have been recently authorized. They're in the Caltrans design manual now. Are there any attempts to incorporate them into, in particular, places that have really high speeds of car travel? I'm thinking, for example, on Jefferson Boulevard.
So there is a plan to incorporate a Class 4 system throughout the city. And actually, what's not reflected in here is we are in the process of designing our first Class 4 in the city. It's fully funded and moving forward. And that will be the remnant of West Capitol Avenue between 5th to Tower Bridge Gateway, I'm sorry, to Garden, about a quarter mile that way. We're going to be removing one travel lane, putting in a Class 4 two-way protected cycle track, and having the existing lane will be one way, about 15 miles an hour, and for access in and out of those parcels only.
Okay.
So that's moving forward. The other plan, which I was going to incorporate into when we have the community meetings, is to utilize the Village Parkway 5th Street route as a north-south, almost through the entire city, protected or buffered bikeway to cover that entire corridor, which would pretty much gain pretty significant commute traffic due to the amount of population down there,
Okay.
and where population tends to move, which would be to downtown for bike commuting.
Mhm.
I'll be happy to have that, and then when I bring it back to this commission in May with a little more expanded map on that.
Okay, but nothing for like the high-speed roadways that we have. The reason I'm thinking Jefferson is because it is 45 miles an hour, goes through the middle of the city,
Sure.
and serves River City High School, is a dropping-off point for, parents have to take it to get to all the other elementary schools effectively in Southport. And so there are quite a few folks who use that system, but I think there's a lot of pent-up demand as well because of fear, because of the speeds on that road.
I would agree with you on the pent-up demand for Southport, especially some of the speeds, some of the roads. The reason I recommended Village Parkway instead of Jefferson is because the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail almost directly parallels Jefferson and would offer a really good alternative. There are portions of Jefferson that would not be able to have such a robust facility due to constraints, and that would be mostly from Park to West Capitol Avenue under the freeway, where we are going through a project now that is funded through SACOG to add bike lanes through there, but we're already at a really significant space crunch due to some of the overpasses and structures that are under there, where a true protected bike lane we couldn't fit all that in with the real estate in there. And I would have concerns about coming from a really robust infrastructure into a lot less infrastructure, and that being a barrier for, perceived barrier for some riding.
I see. Thank you.
For me, I'd like to just kind of keep on reiterating it. I know that like in the Bridgeway Island and Bridgeway Lakes area, I know of a lot of folks, recreational bikers, who really feel cut off from really robust bike commute options, because you can't take Southport Parkway if you want to keep living your life through that little stretch of area there. So you have to either cut across Marshall and then go down Jefferson, which we've already kind of talked about as kind of hairy on its own, or you got to cut through residential like crazy just to get to that Clarksburg Trail. So I think that there's when we talk about pent-up demand, I think in that area particularly, there's a lot of folks. I mean, you have your avid bikers who know how to navigate that type of traffic, but for your recreational ones who say, yeah, maybe I'd like to commute to Sacramento to work every, once a week or so, that's a definite, right now there is a definite barrier because of the lack of options to really effectively commute into downtown.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you on that. What Southport Parkway lacks is the physical roadway to add a bike lane. And this is a challenge in my industry, where we see vacant parcels that are going to be developed, and when they're developed, we're going to have those frontage improvements that'll add that. It's a challenge for us to get those funded when it's a potential development project down the road. I tried unsuccessfully to include those into a grant proposal for road rehabilitation, where we would have added a little bit of enough asphalt to add a bike lane on either side. But unfortunately, that was not successful. I would put Southport Parkway and the industrial and harbor as the two top priorities for a bike lane in the city, because of the constraints and the connections that they would bring. They are our two last big arterials that really lack a consistent connection. So, but I agree with you, and we're moving and trying to be as creative as we can to find funding to make those things happen.
Yeah, because doesn't Southport Parkway also have a giant concrete median with flowers and trees in it? And
It does.
so you could do, you wouldn't even have to technically do a road diet or diminish lanes. You could just diminish the median, and you'd have enough asphalt on the sides to still move your truck traffic, because I know you have to serve with trucks into that industrial section. But
There's still a pretty considerable expense to relocating all of that to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
So
But it's still within the roadway. You wouldn't have to be asking for additional edge, right? Doesn't that change the nature of the ask?
That would, and it might even calm some traffic at the same time.
Okay.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Yeah,
Questions?
I do. I'm sorry. Yeah, when I look at this, I see attempts to avoid those major arterials, because that's kind of what we have to work with, and I recognize the constraints. But it also, when you look at the map and you realize that we've built a city around moving cars, and that gives cars those most central lines, that becomes more problematic for bicycles and pedestrians, because a quarter-mile shift doesn't dramatically affect a car, but it does dramatically affect a cyclist, especially a person who is only commuting or only going to the grocery store, and that affects behavior. So just in the future, as we consider those, to the extent that you can, I would encourage you to really try to push on those central arterials that are currently arterials for cars, and encourage mode shift as much as we can.
Sure.
And I appreciate the work that you've done on this.
Oh, thank you. The one overarching theme, pretty much, with what you're looking at here is we are trying to bridge the significant barriers we have to north-south movement in this town. To the north, which is not reflected on these maps, and I apologize for that, the rail is a tremendous barrier for crossing both vehicular and active transportation wise. Just to the south, that Highway 50 is also a pretty big barrier. There's not many crossings that are suitable for walking and biking, Harbor being one. So we're looking at our freeway overpass, the Sycamore Phase 2, which is currently about to go into design. We have funded to bridge one of those gaps. And then the Deepwater Channel to the south, which is also a challenge, where we have those barriers to even vehicular movements. So they funnel all the vehicular movements, which create fast arterials across these big connections, which then create difficult conditions for walking and biking. So those are the challenges that we are trying to unravel a little bit as we move this plan forward.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item number 5. So we have the memo about the advisory committee for age-friendly communities effort, and we need to have volunteers to serve on this committee, and we also need to have a volunteer to serve as an alternative.
Can we have maybe staff talk about for the record, what the memo is all about and why it's come to us?
Sure.
Thank you.
The memo you're looking at here is a request from Mayor Cabaldon for each of the commissions to assign a representative and an alternate to sit on the Age-Friendly Communities Commission, which will be initiated in April and meeting. They haven't determined the meeting schedule yet, but we'll be meeting probably every month or every couple months for about a year to talk about age-related communities in the city. So that is the memo in front of you, and feel free to make a decision.
I would, if the commission would like, I would volunteer to serve as one of the representatives for this commission.
And I can serve as an alternate.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Vessel. Thank you. And now, let's move on to the calendar, our commission calendar. Jennifer?
It's
2
May
months, right?
2nd, I believe.
May.
Yeah.
May-ish?
First Monday in May is May 2nd.
May 2nd.
Okay.
Can you also maybe indicate, I know that usually around April, May is the state of the city. Do we know when that is occurring?
It's
I know
in
that-
May.
Yeah,
I know May. That's as far as I got.
Yeah, it's usually May.
yeah. Can we maybe get an update as to some of that, please? That'd be great, thank you.
Okay. Any additional reports from city staff?
None from staff.
Great. So any motion to adjourn?
Well, I would like I have a future agenda item request. This deals, I think, a little more with infrastructure, but I had mentioned earlier offline, some comments are, I'm curious as to the nature of the development around Southport in general. How we are encouraging, business development, the kinds of business development, whether it's small locally owned or larger locally owned is fine too, or whether it's in such a way as to only encourage, really, really large franchises to be able to operate on existing property. And I say this for a couple of reasons. First, I did tool around a little bit with opening a shop myself, but second, I've noticed in my short time living here of 8 years that most of the buildings that have been empty along Southport 8 years ago are still also empty, and that there's a lot of, seems to be a growing sense of what some of my colleagues in the advocacy community call the suburbanization of poverty. And led me to consider the look of Southport development, and how it doesn't seem to resemble West Sacramento as a community nearly so much as it resembles more and more any typical suburb around the country, which is something that is disturbing, I think, to me and to most West Sacramentans. If you go to northern West Sacramento, like Brighton, Broderick, you get a sense that you're in a city that is unique and has its own unique nature. And when you travel or live in Southport communities, you can take pictures down those streets, and they tend to resemble pictures of Elk Grove or of Fremont or other places where you've seen large-scale development in a very short period of time. And I've grown in the short time I've lived here to really appreciate the city and the city's life and its diversity, including diversity of opinions. But I haven't seen the kind of development that looks like a West Sacramento development, either in the business community, in the retail communities, or in the living developments, in recent developments. And that is in contrast to what's happening in the city center, which seems to have a real, a unique feel and a unique attachment to other neighboring communities, but also to the river and to our outdoors experiences and things like watching the farm coming up and seeing the, Braley Field, how really nice it is and still small in size, but when you get in, how large it is. These are all unique characteristics to West Sacramento that I don't get the same sense when I go to Southport, and it's something that it's growing on me over time as something that we should address. So I don't know how to couch this as a future agenda item request, but maybe it starts with in the general plan development, how we see those big slab developments for business along Jefferson moving forward, and if they're moving forward in ways that are friendly to local business and local investment, or if they are overwhelmingly only attractive to those large corporations who do not have any need or reason to have a concern for the people who live immediately adjacent to it.
Oh, that reminds me, I do have another item for future agenda. That is, some residents from around the Stonegate Elementary have asked me to look into the issue of adding a traffic light right next to Stonegate, on Stonegate Elementary, on the Stonegate, Boulevard, right at the entrance of the school. They're saying that having a traffic light would relieve the more early morning traffic a lot, rather than having a stop sign where every car has to stop right at the stop sign, and that's a delay in terms of morning traffic. If our staff could look into that issue, that'd be great. Some residents brought this issue up to me.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, now can we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.